Talking with Angels, a document from Hungary, oral text by Hanna Dallos, transcription and commentary by Gitta Mallasz. English rendition by Robert Hinshaw, assisted by Gitta Mallasz and Leila Fischli. Published by Daimon Verlag. Narrated by Shelley Mitchell. This audiobook is dedicated to Amelia, Michael, and Audrey. A technical note. The dialogues comprising this book have been transcribed from handwritten notes in the Hungarian language by Gitta and Lily during the actual events as dated. Many of the original dialogue notes, including all of Joseph's and the personal notes of Lily, were subsequently lost, and some dialogues were incompletely recorded as indicated. Many of the accompanying explanatory texts in italics were added immediately after a dialogue, while others were added during the preparation of this text. It is hoped that the rather unusual mode of notation employed in this edition will help to convey at least an approximate impression of the experiential quality of these dialogues. Certain words were pronounced with emphasis and subsequently underlined in the notes, indicated here by italics. Others had an almost palpable feeling, engraving themselves indelibly into the participants. They were designated in the notes by capitalization of the first letter, a practice retained in the present edition. The most powerful words and sentences of all are indicated by the use of all capital letters. The word is an all-encompassing Hungarian pronoun for the divine. This simple word has neither masculine nor feminine connotations. It is both and all. Because there is no equivalent in the English language, we've elected to retain the original word here. This may seem strange at first, but it is hoped that the reader will soon adjust to it. The advantage of being able to avoid using inappropriate pronouns seemed to outweigh all other considerations. The particular intonation of enabled the participants to immediately know whether the divine or Jesus was being referred to. As a means of differentiating in this edition, we refer to the divine with and to Jesus with he, him, or his. The pronoun was always pronounced with great veneration. Gitta Mallasz had the feeling that it referred to God or Jesus, but she could not always clearly perceive the difference. When Gitta believed it referred to the divine, it was marked with capital letters. When it referred to Jesus, with he, him, or his. This mode of differentiation has been maintained. Preface to the revised and expanded 5th edition. In the many years since Talking with Angels was first published, considerable additional information has come to light, and it has been made a part of this new edition of the dialogues. Much of this material was given to Leila Fischli and me directly by Gitta Mallasz in response to our questions regarding content and context. We had long and detailed conversations and correspondence with Gitta, not only while working on our own respective translations into German and English, but also in connection with numerous other translations, which we have been coordinating and supporting since the early 1980s. When the dialogues were originally published, Gitta withheld some textual passages for various reasons. This was often to avoid having the texts become too lengthy in accordance with the wishes of the original French publisher. She also found some text passages too obscure, too personal, too fragmentary, or likely to be misunderstood. In a few cases, she felt the texts were simply not translatable because of their unique poetic essence in Hungarian. However, in working with translators and other interested readers over the years and decades, we found this previously excluded material to be so helpful for the better understanding of the dialogues that we have recently elected to include it. first in German and now in the new English language edition, and soon in the French as well, even if the translations cannot do justice to the beautiful flow of the often rhyming Hungarian prose. The most substantial addition in this new edition is inclusion of the messages of Morgan. While agreeing that these messages could not be adequately translated in all of their original beauty, we nevertheless felt that their inclusion would contribute significantly to a better understanding of the dialogues. This new material, also including some additional notes by Lily, has been carefully woven into the present edition, at times with explanatory notes. The result is a longer text, but hopefully one that is able to provide a more clear picture for the reader of how the dialogues transpired and were understood. The only survivor from the group of women deported from Catalin was Eva Dallos, one of the Jolly Jokers who was first a close friend of Lily and then of Hanna as well. She was present during some of the final dialogues. See the comment by Gitta on page 459. Immediately upon her release from the Dachau concentration camp in the summer of 1945, Eva Dallos wrote down all that she could recall in a shocking diary-like report describing her deportation experience. This document was first privately circulated in English translation in her new homeland, Australia, by the author in 1989. 11 years later, it was published as a book in Europe, Prison on Wheels. This was followed in 2001 by a German edition and a French version, including a biography of the author in 2012. This detailed report by Eva Dallos augments and clarifies the final commentary by Gitta Mallasz in Talking with Angels. According to Eva Dallos, 16 women from the factory were taken prisoner on December 1, 1944, including 2 nurses who had been responsible for care of the Catalan workers. Everyone in this group had feared that both Father Clinda and Gitta would face grim consequences because of the mass exodus by the others. On December 2nd, these women and about 1,000 others were transported to Ravensbrück in the very last convoy of Hungarians to depart Budapest for Germany. Eva Dallos reported that it was impossible to volunteer for commandos in the concentration camp. Also, any indication or even proof of Aryan origins would not have resulted in release or any form of privilege. In Ravensbrück, there were many non-Jewish prisoners engaged in forced labor. Hanna died during the night of February 28th, March 1st, near Beirut, and Lily during the night of March 2nd and 3rd, near Augsburg, while both on a prisoner transport train between Ravensbrück and Burgau, where they were being taken to work on assembling engines for fighter bombers. Eva Dallos' document provides an authentic and first-hand account of the sufferings of prisoners during the final months of the war, and is a moving testimonial of humanity and friendship under the worst of conditions. A memorial plaque was placed in the Augsburg Cemetery, Westfriedhof, in 1950, marking the final resting place of Lily Strauss and 234 other victims. Hanna Dallos is buried together with other victims in the municipal cemetery in Beirut, where a memorial marker was erected in 2015. Gitta Mallasz died in France in 1992. She was posthumously honored in May of 2012 in Paris by Yad Vashem, Museum of Martyrs, as a Chassid Umot HaOlam, righteous among the nations, for the rescue of more than 100 women and children who had lived in Catalin. This award is presented to non-Jews who risked their lives to save Jews during the Holocaust. Robert Hinshaw, Willertzel, 2019. Preface to the first edition. This English-language publication of the Angel Dialogues was a long time in coming. The remarkable events documented here took place in Hungary during the late stages of the Second World War in 1943 and 44. As their life situations and gradually their very chances for survival grew ever darker, the four close-knit friends were suddenly met by a force which came to be known to them as angels. This extraordinary encounter continued for 17 months. Talking with Angels was the first unabridged translation of their original Hungarian protocols to be published. 3 of the friends eventually perished in Nazi concentration camps, and the sole survivor, Gitta Mallasz, was obliged to remain underground with her precious documents and to concentrate on supporting her family of 7, her parents, her brother, and his wife and children, who had gone from wealth to poverty during the war. This phenomenon of radical change from one station in life to the next always accompanied Gitta. Her struggle for survival in post-war communist Hungary was to last more than 15 years. When the opportunity finally came for a new beginning, her parents had died and her nephews and nieces reached adulthood, Gitta was able to make her way through the Iron Curtain to France with the precious black notebooks wrapped tightly in bedsheets in her one small suitcase. In Paris in 1960, life began anew at the age of 53. Gitta re-established her considerable reputation as a stage, set, and graphic designer, and she met and married Lacey, a dear man who had also immigrated from Hungary. With the help from him and a few close friends, she began the difficult task of translating the protocols of the dialogues into French, her third language after Hungarian and German. Through one of these friends, the existence of the dialogues was brought to the attention of a prominent French radio journalist, Claude Maitre, who, after reading them, invited Gitta to be a guest on his weekly national program, The Living and the Gods. That famous first 90-minute interview, broadcast live by Radio France on April 22, 1976, marked the beginning of the dialogues becoming publicly known. Gitta had long been aware that making the dialogues accessible to all was part of her task. She understood them to be important for more than just the 4 original participants, but she had no means of making them available to others. Now at last she had a forum. Radio France was deluged with letters responding to her impressive message. Claude Maitre packed together a large bundle of them and marched to the modest but renowned Parisian publishing house Aubier Montagne. Gitta's manuscript was quickly accepted, trimmed, and prepared for publication, appearing later in 1976 as Dialogue avec l'Ange. Though practically unadvertised, it became an immediate sensation and was reviewed and discussed on radio and in newspapers throughout the land. It's interesting to note that the dialogues had their first and greatest public success and were met with such resounding echo in France of all places, a land of people known for sharp intellect and skeptical rationalism. Perhaps this is because of the document's straightforward, down-to-earth character in contrast to so many other publications dealing with esoteric matters. Gitta herself chose to remain in the background. After her radio appearance, she declined all of the inevitable public speaking invitations and continued to live her normal daily life in relative anonymity. It was not only her natural modesty that kept Gitta out of the limelight. She had a strong aversion to the tendency people often had of attributing their hopes and fears and admiration to her personally, to their wanting to make her into a kind of guru. She was convinced that the real message is for each reader to find an own personal relationship to the words of the document, to experience it themselves. This is also the reason why photographs of Gitta and the other participants are not published with the dialogues. In 1973, Gitta and her husband retired from Paris to a small farmhouse which they themselves restored in the Dordogne region of the French countryside. Lacey built all the furniture by hand from local materials. Far from the city, and close to nature again, as in her childhood, Gitta continued to live a simple life, to respond to the many letters concerning Dialogue avec l'Ange over the years, and, to her greatest joy, to devote her energies to working on foreign language editions of the dialogues. In 1983, her quiet life in retirement ended when she received a speaking invitation she had never anticipated. The C.G. Jung Institute of Zurich asked her to talk with its students about her experience with the angels. Having been deeply impressed during the arduous years in Budapest after the war by Jung's writings, the latter greatly comforted by his descriptions of dialogues with his inner guide, Philemon, in his biography. Gitta felt that she could not say no to this invitation. She made the long train journey to Zurich and spent 2 lively evenings first describing and then discussing her experience of the dialogues with a full house of fascinated listeners. The tremendous resonance in Zurich convinced Gitta that it might, after all, be appropriate for her to reveal more of her personal experiences in connection with the dialogues, along with the actual protocols, and in the ensuing years she made extensive speaking tours and conducted workshops throughout France, Switzerland, Holland, Germany, Austria, and Belgium. Further, Gitta came to feel that it was appropriate to put her energies to work, forming the often personal material of her correspondence with readers and later of her speaking encounters into a book. The result was Die Engel erlebt, roughly The Angels Experienced, originally published late in 1983 in German and French. Other translations have followed. The second book, Weltermorgen, roughly Dawning World, followed by Sprung ins Unbekannte, Leap into the Unknown, continued Gitta's ever more personal response to the many questions addressed to her in the time since the dialogues were first published. Work on this English-language edition of the dialogues began in 1984. A shortened English edition had been published in 1979 in limited printing. Then it was decided to go back to the beginning and carefully work with Gitta word by word on the basis of the original handwritten Hungarian texts to create a complete transcript of the dialogues in English. This was to prove a laborious and time-consuming process, but a very rewarding one. Hanna conveyed from her inner ear to the Hungarian language, and now this translation takes the dialogues one step further into English. In numerous sessions in Villerzell, Einsiedeln, and Gitta's Girardel, and with almost daily communication between these meetings, the new English edition slowly took form over the course of the next 4 years. Along the way, several fragments came to light that had been neglected or edited out of previous editions of the dialogues, and as questions arose during the English language formulation, explanatory notes were added. After Gitta's devoted husband Lacey died in 1982, she continued to live alone in the little farmhouse in Girardel. Then, in 1988, just as the final proofs of this book were on their way to the printer, she suffered a near-fatal accident. Her life was spared, but both arms were broken. She understood her survival to indicate that her earthly task had not yet been completed. Gitta then went to live in a small cottage on a farm close to young friends in the northeastern part of the country. Here she continued to have her all-important independent existence in her own little hermitage, but without the at times almost total seclusion of her previous abode in the south. Her public speaking engagements became less frequent with increasing age. But she made the occasional trip by TGV into Paris for ever larger audiences and continued to fulfill her task in a variety of angel-related projects and her far-reaching correspondence. She died in May of 1992. What is it that makes talking with angels so gripping, so humanly appealing? For me, an important part of it is the naturalness in which these 4 ordinary young people, none of whom had experienced religious instruction, accepted the sudden appearance of angels into their everyday existence. That this luminous and numinous event came just at the darkest hour of their lives is surely significant. It shows that possibilities for new ways and for transformation do come to us at times when there seems to be no solution, if only we're open to them. The angels taught Gitta and her friends, and continue to teach us, that earthly existence is only a part of a whole. Once we realize this, death is not something to be feared. As we become aware of the ever-moving, the undogmatic, what the angels teach as light, we learn that not the eternally repetitive is eternal, but the eternally new. The angels tell us that the more light we are able to bear, the more aware we become, and the closer we come to our peak, the meeting point with our own angel. Our personal angel strives to descend from above and meet us at this same point. Thus, we are not alone in this endeavor, even if our way of going about it is very individual. Whatever way each one of us goes through this experience is not of importance, only that we do so, each in his or her unique way. That is, for me, the essence and the inspiration of these dialogues. Gitta never tired of reminding her listeners and readers that she was not the author of this text, but merely the scribe. She considered it her task to make the dialogues available to others. When asked not long before her death how she felt about the dialogues, Gitta answered, "You know, these words are like seeds that were sown by the angels. They lay dormant in the earth for 33 years. They finally broke through the hard crust of the surface for the first time in 1976 with the publication of the French dialogues in Paris, and from there they spread like wildfire. No, like light fire. Now the springtime of humanity is here. And these words represent a very real possibility for all." The angels said, "What could be more natural than our talking to each other?" May this book help many new dialogues be born. Robert Hinshaw, Villersel, 1988, 2006.